I've been thinking a lot about foundations lately. And no, it's not really in like a poetic way, not as a metaphor that I plan to use in some video somewhere. It's more in the way that a 50-year-old thinks about whatever happens to be hurting that day, which is a lot. And lately, my list of aches has grown long enough to qualify for a part-time job. Every joint seems convinced it is the protagonist of my entire existence, and none of them are subtle about it. They announce themselves every time I bend down to pick up a toy train or attempt something heroic, like standing up from a couch too quickly. Maybe that's why I have been noticing how much of leadership actually comes down to what sits underneath everything that we try to build. The part we don't talk about, the part that people assume is completely fine because they've not bothered to test it lately. The part that leaders neglect because there's always something louder or more urgent to deal with, always. Now, I've been totally guilty of that for years. I have built an entire career on improvisation and grit. It was tough, but I did it. I was even proud of how much I could carry, proud of how many fires that I could put out, proud of how much pressure I could absorb for everybody else around me. Then I turned 50, and my body decided to unionize against me. So I started waking up with whole committees of muscles filing grievances about the working conditions that I had apparently been subjecting them to for years. And I just kept going because leaders and me are stubborn. And then I got to spend several days with Joseph, my grandson, who's 3 years old and convinced that my living room is one giant train station. So we built tracks everywhere. We loaded engines. We reloaded engines. We rescued engines from being crashed into couch cushions. It was chaos and joy all at the same time. And it reminded me that even something as simple as playing requires a foundation that makes sense. Otherwise, everything topples over and you end up with a toddler staring at you like you've ruined his entire day, maybe his whole life. It made me think about the shift that's happening in my career right now. If you followed my work for any length of time, you know that I have lived squarely in the world of consulting and coaching for decades. Some seasons were great. Some weren't. But all of them were heavy. I used to joke about being 100 years old in coaching, but that's not really a joke anymore. It actually feels pretty accurate. You see, when you spend your life carrying the emotional load of people who are trying to build something meaningful, your nervous system eventually taps you on the shoulder and says something kind of like, please stop. So I stopped, or at least I stopped doing it the way that I had always done it before. And I stepped away from the version of my career that required me to be the stabilizer, the fixer, the person who held everything together while quietly falling apart behind the scenes. Does that sound familiar? You see, I knew there had to be a better way to help leaders without sacrificing my own health or sanity. And that's where the Impact Shift training system came from. It was not born out of strategy. It was born out of necessity. My necessity to be honest. I needed a way to build something sustainable for me and life-giving for other people. Here's what surprised me. There was so much resistance that leaders have had to the idea of a foundation. Now, it's not because they don't believe in it. Most of them do. They know that their lives would be easier if they had clear rhythms, clear decision lanes, and systems that did not depend on them being beyond superhuman. But they are used to improvising. They are used to reacting to stuff, and they are used to putting their foot down on the gas, even when the engine is begging for a break. They tell themselves that they're going to slow down later. They never do. There's not comfort in the chaos of a poorly designed structure. Leaders get used to helping or being the one that can handle, well, anything. It becomes a part of their identity. Then they stop questioning whether they should be the hero because the world keeps rewarding them for acting like one. Guess what happens next? The foundation starts to crack. Sometimes it cracks quietly. Sometimes it cracks really loudly. And sometimes the only sign is that the leader begins staring at walls longer than normal because their brain She's trying to reboot. Now I know this because I became that person. I found myself rebuilding 500 videos worth of training material, inventing a new way to approach leadership, redesigning everything I had ever taught, and convincing myself that I was still fine. You see, I believed in the work. I still do. But I didn't realize how much of my confidence was built on effort rather than stability. My foundation was worn pretty thin, and I kept decorating the upstairs of the building because repairing the support beams that were holding all together was too much work, too hard. That's the part of this new chapter that feels so strange. I built something that I believe in more than anything I've ever done. And the world, you're not rushing towards it. Not yet. I expected a little bit more momentum, if I'm being totally transparent. I expected leaders to feel the difference immediately. But foundations aren't glamorous. They're not flashy. They certainly don't trend on social media. People tend to discover their importance only after everything above them starts to wobble, which brings me back to Joseph and our trains. Every time I tried to add more engines or to create some kind of complicated masterpiece of track design, and they were amazing, but it made the experience worse for him because he wasn't looking for more. He needed simple, he needed stable, he needed space to improvise and play and discover. My job was not to control the game. My job was to set the ground that he played on. Now, leadership is really the same. We don't need no more noise. We don't need more pressure. We do not need 17 new features or 5 new strategies or a heroic push through another exhausting quarter. We need a foundation that can hold the weight of who we're becoming. Because leaders grow, they evolve, they change seasons. They outgrow the systems that they built 5 years ago. It's inevitable. And if the foundation does not evolve along with them, the whole thing starts to feel like a job that they never applied for. Now, ISTS gives leaders that foundation. It quiets the noise, it stabilizes the load, it gives you space to think again. Leaders forget how powerful that feeling is, that feeling of being able to breathe inside the company that you built instead of constantly bracing for the next thing to go wrong. And once you experience that shift, it becomes almost impossible to go back to the old way. You cannot unknow what it feels like to be supported by a structure instead of smothered by it. Now, I'm in this reinvention alongside everyone who will use ISTS. I am rebuilding my own foundation while teaching others how to rebuild theirs. It feels a little bit strange and honest and humbling. There are moments and mornings when I feel like the oldest beginner in the entire world. And then there are other mornings when I feel more alive than I have in years because I'm finally building something that aligns with the person that I'm trying to become. Listen, reinvention is messy. Reinvention is hopeful. Reinvention is both an ending and a beginning. So if you feel tired or stretched thin or disconnected from the business that you created, listen, trust me, you're not broken. You're not failing. You're not behind. You might simply be standing on a foundation that no longer matches the weight of your life. Here's the good news. That can be rebuilt. You can design something that supports you instead of draining you. You can create a system that breathes with you instead of tightening around you every day. And you can become the leader who actually enjoys leading again. For now, I'm going to keep learning from the 3-year-old who reminds me daily that the simplest tracks create the best adventures. Foundation matters more than the trains. The foundation matters more than the speed. And when the foundation is right, even the messy moments become part of the joy.